the drain.
Ladies and gentlemen, Fear the Walking Dead Season 8, the final season of the show, just wrapped up, and, well, I have some thoughts. Okay, so if you haven't, I'm just going to preface it with this. If you haven't seen my review of the finale and the episode that aired before it, because this was a two-part finale, if you haven't seen that, go check it out before you watch this video, because this video is going to dive deep into everything about this season. And yeah, that's all I got to say. Because this is going to be another rant video, guys. I'm not done.
I'm not fucking leaving. The show goes on.
I'm not done yet with all the rants of this show, because it goes off, man. This show just goes off. And Season 8 was arguably the worst season of Fear the Walking Dead, just point blank, period. Now, I have to preface this by saying I have been a big fan of the show. I've been a big fan, as you guys know, of The Walking Dead overall for years. It has a very special place in my heart, the franchise as a whole. I'd argue that it's like kind of like one of those like comfort shows at this point, even though I don't like it anymore and there's things in it that I'm not fond of. I'd argue that there are really strong elements that just have a sentimental value to me. So while I am going to rip on Fear the Walking Dead, and you guys know that I've been ripping on Fear the Walking Dead for quite some time, but just know that it actually comes from a place of love, because I have admiration for everything this universe. I really do. I genuinely do. So just wanted to preface it with that before we get into what I think is the worst season of TV among many shows ever. Like, God. The problem with Season 8 of Fear the Walking Dead is it is just misguided. And that's the case with the show after Season 4. It really is. That's unfortunately what happened with the show. And it goes into a lot of little details, but the biggest reason for that, which I talked about in my video all about the rise and fall of Fear the Walking Dead, which I'm going to link up here, the real reason for that is I genuinely wholeheartedly believe that this show was meant to go in a totally different direction than it did, but unfortunately exterior circumstances ruined that. Things such as Nick, Frank Delane, being killed off of the show, they ruined it. Things like other actors like Alicia Dendham Carey wanting to leave righteously, which all power to her. I think those changed the trajectory, and it just felt misguided. I think there was budgetary constraints that just destroyed the show. So with all of those things considered, I think there's a lot there as to why this show went down the path that it did. So I do have a little bit of sympathy for that, but in the end of the day, I don't, because it's a fault of the writers and the directives at AMC to let this shit go on, to let the shenanigans that we saw play out. Ian and Andrew should have been fired a very long time ago for what they did to this show. They just absolutely should have. And again, it's circumstantial, so some of the things that happened were circumstantial, but it's also a big fault of the writers, who did an absolutely piss-poor job at turning this show into something. They turned it into nothing. This show just went nowhere, in my opinion. So, let's get into it. Season 8 was just a train wreck. Season 7 was also a train wreck, but Season 8 more so, because it just, I feel like of all the seasons of Fear the Walking Dead, this is the one season where it truly, just every episode was like, characters are here, then they're there, they're in this scene, then they're out of this scene, then they just teleport from place to place with there's no guidance there, there's no anything. People teleported around this season, storylines just played out just to play out, which made no sense whatsoever, and things just truly felt disjointed. They really did. And it starts with an awful execution of the Padre story. So that's what we got in Season 8A. The first half of this season was all about Morgan and his daughter. And the second half was all about Madison and making Padre great again, like Donald Trump or something like that. Like, literally, that's what the second half was, whereas the first half was all about Morgan Jones. So it went from the Morgan Jones and friends story to the Madison Clark story once again with the revival of Troy Otto. It felt all over the place. And those are the problems that we have. So I guess let's start with the first half, Season 8A. Season 8A was just, again, trash. Just straight up trash. And that's because of the execution. One, Baby Mo was terrible. It was cringy. The entire thing there was ridiculous. Like her wanting to destroy a herd of 1,000+ walkers when she's only 11 and barely knows how to fight. And early on in the show, you could tell like she didn't know what she was doing. So that's one thing. Then the other thing is Shrike, Crane, and all of those people. They just sucked. Like, their addition on screen was absolutely terrible. Shrike just stood around and did nothing the entire run of the first half, and we just all wanted her dead. Every single one of us, I guarantee you, was cheering when she died, and her death episode was just absolutely abysmal at that, to be honest with you, so it's not like that even made it any better, which is crazy, but just that whole thing was just so out of place, and it got... When you know it got bad was when Morgan went back to King County. And while I did like that episode on some fronts to tie Morgan Jones's story and kind of wrap that up, it also just felt so misguided. Like, how did he end up in King County? We still don't understand that. And I don't know when we're ever going to understand that. And just all the things that ensued, like Shrike showed up to King County and was like, I saw the way you killed Walker, so I want you to clear out these fucking things in Padre. Like, none of it makes sense. None of it made any sense. And that's the biggest problem, despite it being cringy. Like, the storylines were just very, very, very cringy in the first half with the kids and all that stuff. Like, we put so much emphasis on Odessa. We put so much emphasis on Mo. We put so much emphasis on Shrike and Crane when it's just, the story was just terrible. Like, we spent, 3 seasons building up to what was Padre? And it turns out Padre is the most idiotic group of kids that I've ever met. And it was just executed so bad. Like, oh man, like that's the shit that was the first half of this season. It was just so bad. It was all filler and it was just junk. People teleported around with no explanations. And I think that was one of the biggest things with this show overall. It really becomes immersion breaking when characters just go from scene to scene, like, and you're wondering the whole time how they got to those places. Like, the amount of times Strand in the back half, and we didn't even get into the back half yet, but the amount of times Strand or another character just magically showed up somewhere where it's like, where the fuck did you come from? It's off the charts. It happened all the time in this show. Not only this season, but in this show. Specifically, though, it was the worst in this season because they had to rush things. Understandably, they had a limited run on episodes, so you don't have as much time to explain it. But in the end of the day, that comes down to writing. You could have written this a million different ways to avoid that, but no, you didn't. And it just makes things look so bad and cringy, and it's just like, who is writing this show? Ian and Andrew should have been fired a very long time ago for that. But honestly, I don't remember too much of the first half. I know a lot of it had to do with Baby Mo, Shrike, and all them, and it just sucked. It was so just bad to watch on screen. But now, because it's more fresh in our heads, and we have it, Season 8B was, I think, even worse. I really do. And honestly, the plot of Season 8B was actually pretty good. Like, if the plot of Season 8B stayed throughout the whole season, I think it would have been a pretty good season if they gave the story a good amount of time to simmer and, to breathe. But no. I mean, on paper, the story is kind of cool. Like, Troy came back, even though I have a lot of problems with it, and we're going to make a video all about that soon. So stay tuned for a video about how Troy coming back's execution was. That's a whole topic for another video. But the idea on paper, even if I hate the idea of him coming back, the idea is good. Troy came back and he kind of like tied everything together. I loved that. I loved that, it was Madison and crew finally again. It felt like Fear the Walking Dead again at last with Madison in it. But in execution, it was just so bad. It was so bad. And I guess the best part of it was Daniel Sharman, who is Troy Otto. And even though, again, for the millionth time, I have a lot of problems with them resurrecting his character because he was a dead man, I do think he was the best addition to the back half. I genuinely do. I think they really did a good job with him, and that's it. That's it. I liked him on screen, period. But I think they leaned into it a little bit too much. They turned him into this like mega villain, but he wasn't even really a villain. Like, he didn't really have a villain arc. He came in and just said he wanted to take over Padre, but he really showed no signs of being a villain. He just taunted with Madison, said he killed his daughter, killed Alicia, but like that's it. Like he didn't really do too much else. Like it wasn't really villainous. He was just kind of a menace, if that makes any sense. And it wasn't done well. It just wasn't. Again, on paper, good idea. In execution, fucking terrible. Like, and then everything else was just bad. Characters were teleporting around like crazy. Madison was just awful on screen, and I just wanted to see her die. I really did. I couldn't stand her this season. Like things like that just absolutely ruined it. Just straight up ruined the show. And it's just crazy. Like, I think I need a little bit more time to give more thoughts. So this is kind of more of my first impressions of the final season, even though we've seen the whole season, so it's not really first impressions. But these are my thoughts after watching the finale. I liked some things they did there. Like, I liked bringing back Alicia. It really was nice. There were some nice moments there. But other than that, the episodes were just terrible. And if you want to see my real raw reactions to all of the moments in the show, they're there. I reviewed every episode on the channel, so feel free to go ahead and check those out for more in-depth rants on things that happen episode by episode. But things were just so bad. Like, the biggest highlights of the worst things in this season, like I said, were the teleporting. And then the other thing was the acting. We had Frank and Klaus and the whole German crew that sucked, in my opinion. And then Tracy was awful. I don't know how they got casted for these roles. I genuinely don't. It was just done so badly. It really is unfortunate. Those things are immersion breaking. They ruin what could have been a fantastic final season, but no. This season was just filled with confusing dialogue, Gimple speak out the wazoo, plot lines that made no sense at all. Like, I'm still trying to understand the whole Alicia was the mother thing, was not the mother, did Alicia know Troy, that whole thing. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. It made no sense. I don't know what they were going for. The whole no one's gone until they're gone thing having such a motif this season was just so confusing. All of that was just terrible. It was just, oh man, it really is wasted potential. This season just had so much that it could have done, but executed it so poorly, and it really is unfortunate. And with all that out of the way, this is a short video giving my thoughts. Season 8 was terrible, and it is a shame, because the ending itself, the ending episode was decent, but like, it was decent for what we got. We got shit, but the ending concluded the shit, and it did so kind of decent, but at that, it's just, oh man, it's so bad. It makes me want to cry. It really does. No, I'm just joking. I'm not actually going to cry over this show. But seriously, it's very unfortunate that we got what we got. And yeah, this isn't a video where I'm going off on a tirade like I usually do, freaking out. I'm just exhausted with this show, guys. That's the review. Season 8 sucked. Maybe I'll do a more in-depth review like later on, but for now, these are my first impressions after having just watched the finale. So yeah, let me know your thoughts on Season 8 down in the comments, and with all that out of the way, thank you again so much for watching this video, and until the next one, I'll talk to you later. Peace out.